Hello and welcome to another episode of Rich in Relationship. And today we're going to talk about something really interesting. We're going to talk about the myth of you gotta work hard on your relationship. And our guest today is Erin Royer, and she has two kick-ass podcasts, Minding the Gap and Parenting Beyond Discipline. How are you, Erin?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Such a pleasure. And I'm really excited about this topic because I think that as Americans, we love the idea of work ethic, but when it comes to relationship, we get really confused about it. But before we leap into it, I want to ask you, I understand that you've got these two podcasts and you're really into parenting and that there's so much more to parenting than discipline. I'm curious, how did your heart lead you into this work?
So, are we talking about the parenting work or the other work? Because there's actually
Which,
two different
how did your heart,
strains.
whichever work you would like to
Okay.
share with us?
So, quickly, I'll talk about the parenting work. I grew up in a family with a lot of abuse and feeling like I wasn't appreciated, like I was a burden. And so, the parenting work, I was led to that by wanting to parent differently and wanting to have a different relationship with my children and wanting them to grow up feeling empowered and confident. So, that was something I really wanted to change. But in the other realm, I've started doing a lot of work in recent years. In the last 5 years, I started to slowly realize that I was really unhappy in my life. And one of those areas, big areas, was my marriage.
Mm.
And I had a really good relationship for all intents and purposes by what people would judge. He's really a great person. There was no resentment. There was, a lot of people have a lazy partner. I did not have a lazy partner. He was a partner who really pitched in,
Working.
but there was something deeper missing there.
Yeah.
But I felt like I didn't have the right to be unhappy in this relationship. And so I pushed those feelings down for a long time, and they kept coming up stronger and harder. And I finally had to face this. And there's a lot of guilt around that because we're taught that till death do us part. And for better, or for worse, you stick this out. And so that was a very difficult thing to come to terms with. It's okay to not feel fulfilled in a relationship, to feel like this isn't pushing you forward to the self that you are becoming, and that it's okay to step out of a relationship that just is no longer working for you.
Got it. Got it. Well, and thank you so much for sharing that. That's painful stuff and
It really is.
important lessons.
Very much.
Yeah. And, there's so much in what you shared that resonates with me and that we talk about here on the Rich in Relationship podcast. The idea that in our wider culture, there's the word that we give when we get married, and then there's this idea that when the going get tough, the tough get going, and the idea that I think surrender is a very slippery word in our culture, which makes people think of quitting and giving up. But sometimes when something's just not working, we need to find a way through that's sustainable, as you point out, for us and for everyone involved.
Very true. And I did a lot of work. And it wasn't like I just said, oh, it's not working and walked away. I read a lot of books. I did a lot of self-discovery. I was going to therapy every week. We went to therapy together. And we really did put in that effort. And I finally just had to say it's okay to walk away.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's interesting, the studies on the impact of conflict, of marital conflicts on children, show that at the top, you've got those couples who figure out how to resolve it and they're like in pretty good harmony and they stay married, right? That the American dream, maybe it's the world dream. And then next, you've got actually at the bottom, what you have is couples who decide they're going to tough it out even though they're in massive disagreement and disharmony. And the kids who come out of those marriages are actually worse off than the kids of divorce, whether the divorce is relatively friendly or whether it's a hostile divorce. Kids in divorce actually come out less damaged than kids who are in a family where the couple stays together because it's till death do you part, and we're just going to work hard on it.
That's really interesting. I haven't heard that statistic, but I have one that's similar, that children of divorce actually can be just as successful, just as resilient, just as happy as children whose parents stay married if the divorce is relatively amicable, if the parents can keep the conflict and co-parent decently together. But conflict in marriage and conflict in divorce are pretty much the same, and it's very, very damaging to the children.
Yeah, no, for sure. If a couple that is having trouble making it work married can make it work as separate parents in separate spaces, so much better for the children than other circumstances.
Yes, very true.
The discussion is around the myth of hard work is what relationships are. The relationships are based on hard work. Tell us more about your experience with this, please.
So what I have seen in my own experience and working with a lot of couples and, in my training as a therapist, I see a lot of couples or partners looking to each other to try to fill a need that they missed growing up. I see a lot of couples just saying, like, if my partner would just do X, we would be happier, we would get along. But the truth is that our partner is a mirror to us. So they can hold up a mirror, and so many times the work is, well, any work in the relationship is always on the self. It's not on the relationship. The relationship can bring it up. It can be a catalyst. It can be a mirror, but the couple really isn't working on the relationship, if that makes sense. Like, I have to go and do my work. You go and do your work. You can hold up a mirror to me and say, if we are going to be successful in this relationship, this is what I need. And then go off and do that work or not. You get to decide. So what I see happening is couples will often, like, it's like a game of tennis. Like, they'll hit the ball over the net and then, like, here's what I need. You toss that over and the partner doesn't hit the ball back. They make it about them. They leave the ball sitting there and just ignore it. And then the person who lobbed the ball is now frustrated and they feel ignored. And there's a lot of resentment that starts to build up. And then we hit another ball over. Well, maybe if I hit it again, maybe they'll hit it back this time. No, okay, I'm going to hit it again. And it just, if they're not picking up the ball, if they're not responding, then it's time to make a decision. Do I want to even try to play tennis with this person anymore?
Yeah, well, and there's so much in that because a lot of the couples I work with, one partner's playing tennis, the other one's playing soccer. So they don't even recognize the ball when it comes over the net, or that there is a net. Like, to them, the net's the goal. The net's like, it's just they have completely different ideas of the game they're playing with each other. They're speaking somewhat different languages and missing each other completely, which makes it even more complicated.
Right. And the other thing I've seen a lot is that, our partner will hold up a mirror, or we'll hold up a mirror to them. And what that mirror reflects is our deepest shadow self and our shame triggers. And so that is a really difficult thing to face and to look at. And so a lot of times there's retreat because it's too painful and it's too deep, and I don't want to look at that and I don't want to deal with that. And so that's why I don't return the ball to you.
How about my listeners? Let's just pretend they don't know what is a shadow self. So when you talk about a shadow self, what do you, but I mean, I think I get, it sounds like what you're talking about. I'm going to help you out here. Is you're talking about that side of ourselves that we're not so proud of, that side of ourselves that maybe hasn't made the best decisions, that side of ourselves that maybe has compromised our own values in life, our guilt, our shame, the things that we're not, the dirty underwear we are less likely to air out.
Very true. It's also the part of ourselves that may actually be what makes us shine, but we've been made to feel ashamed of it. So we're too much, right? Mm-hmm. We're too extra. We're too emotional. We're too affectionate. We're too, whatever, too quiet, too outgoing. It could be a part of us that's actually a very positive piece, but we've been
We
through our
framed it as a negative.
Right, we've been told as a child, like, you're too emotional, you're too much, you need to tone it down, or you're too quiet, you need to be more outgoing. And so if we get that triggered because we've been taught and been programmed that this is not a good thing to be, then we can hide that piece, which is really the most amazing piece of us.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you've got that side of yourself, and the world is your mirror. So what starts happening there? You're getting into disagreement, we'll call it. We'll start with disagreement with your partner, which is inevitable, right? We're human beings. It'd be a really boring place if we all agreed on everything all the time. Though it might be kind of peaceful, there wouldn't be a lot of change. Wouldn't be a lot of growth if we all agreed on everything, most likely. So you get into some kind of disagreement, which to all perspective purposes is going to happen. And all of a sudden, the other person is your mirror. And what do you start seeing over there?
So let's just say we were told as a child we were lazy. And so now we work really, really hard, and our partner brings up something we're not doing, and we're already working really, really hard. And there's one thing we dropped the ball on, or one thing that we missed. And so it triggers that shame about, I'm lazy, I'm not enough, I don't work hard enough, I don't give enough. And so that can just, instead of having a conversation about that, if that just gets triggered and we don't realize that that's what's happening within us, we get really defensive and we bark back at our partner about how I'm already doing everything I can and you're not helping enough. And so we're not having a conversation about what do we expect from each other? What is too much? I'm overwhelmed. Let's talk about how we can work together.
Hold on. So then we're barking back at our partner. And what does that bring up in them?
Well, it brings up either their shadow self, which is possible, something that they're ashamed of, or it could just bring up, I can't bring anything up. Like, you're not approachable, so we can't work on anything. So now I'm just not going to talk about the struggles in this relationship. I'm just going to let it go because that's easier than trying to have a conversation. This is a trigger from my partner. So it's easier to just kind of, never mind, let it go. And then it's just going to build. It's going to build and it's going to build. And then we're in crisis.
And then you bring in this work ethic. Oh, we've made a commitment here. And, I've seen my parents go through this, and yeah, they toughed it out. And so how does that impact that whole back and forth?
So couples will do different things. Either they'll fight a lot, they'll just bicker and fight, and it'll just get worse and worse, or everybody's shoving everything down. They're resentful of each other. We're barely talking to each other. We're kind of getting through life together, raising the kids together, and the kids are seeing one or both of these patterns where, my parents just don't talk to each other, and they learn, like, oh, this is what a relationship is. A relationship means it's better when we don't talk to each other because then we fight. And they don't learn how to resolve conflict and how to have conversations about needs and relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, the two kinds of clients we see over here are either high conflict couples or couples who are avoiding conflict, exactly what you described. And usually in the conflict avoidance couples, what's happened is eventually it explodes for some reason. There's infidelity, or some money is spent that shouldn't have been spent, or some kind of breach of trust that triggers a conflict, and they go, oh my God, we got to do something about this. So yeah, it is very typical and normal. So the problem with we got to work at this. We're like, good marriages are built on hard work. Is if you're working hard on the wrong thing, you're just digging a deeper and deeper pit, into what's not working.
Exactly. And so when we turn back to ourselves, and we can start to do the work on ourselves, which is the only place we have control. We have zero control over our partner, what they do with the information that we give them, but we have 100% control over ourselves. So how can I show up differently? So whether this is a relationship that's going to work or isn't going to work.
I think that would be nice if we had 100% control over ourselves, but we definitely have 100% influence over ourselves. So my personal experience of myself is it's not always as controllable as I would like it to be, but it can be manageable. But I think far more manageable than my wife. I've got this much influence there, and I've got infinite influence over here.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I have pretty much 100% control over what choice I make today. What am I going to do today? Am I going to ignore this, or am I going to face this and make a change for myself? And so that's where I have control. I have thoughts that are sometimes come in that I don't feel like I have control, and I work to get control over my own thoughts.
I feel that. I do. I feel that. And I'm sure every listener has had that moment where it's like, this is not where I want to go, but I'm going there.
Right. Right.
All right. Yes. But in that moment where we recognize that we're going someplace we don't want to go, it is true. That is where we have a choice.
So, yeah, so taking that control of, so whether this relationship is going to move forward and get healthier, or whether it's not, and we want a relationship in the future, there's going to have to be some work on the self.
Absolutely.
You know, what are my triggers? What is causing this? How can I accept my shadow self? We need to accept ourselves 100% before we can ever heal that.
So true. So true. What we reject in ourselves, we reject in others. I have a client who is despondent. She feels that her husband doesn't want to listen to her, that he's emotionally unavailable, and she's sure that she needs to bug out of this relationship. And I have shared with her the idea that there's only one person that she can change. And her reaction, I'm really asking this question for the audience because I know this comes up for the audience. Her reaction is, so what? If I change, she's still going to be the same angry, ignorant asshole that he's showing up as. And I'm curious what your response would be to someone like that.
Well, my response would be, who do you want to be? How do you want to show up for yourself and for other people, whether it's for this person or not? You're going to go on and have other relationships, whether it's a romantic relationship or relationships with friends, family, coworkers, children. How do you want to show up? Who do you want to be in the world? And work on becoming that person. So why deny the world of the best you, whoever you're interacting with? Like,
and the impact on her husband, and as she starts to shift and change and embrace herself, how will that impact her husband, who she currently perceives as being a certain way?
It may influence him. He may see a difference if she's not grumpy and complaining and constantly nagging. That may be enough for him to shift. And it may not, but not having any attachment to the outcome.
Yes.
Just saying, I'm doing this for me. I'm doing this because I want to show up in a different way in future relationships, in a relationship with myself and how I see myself.
I think that's it. I think it comes down to, what kind of relationships do I want to have, and how do I need to be to create the space for that relationship to happen? Now, we can invite people into the space and they may or may not want to play, but without being able to create the space, the opening for the kind of relationship we want to happen, then nothing's going to happen. It starts. I'm 100% with you. It starts over here. I hope she listens to this podcast. Listen, this is great stuff. How can people find you, find your podcasts, find your work?
So I have 2 podcasts, and the one where this is for adults who are looking to change. It's about transformation, the process of transformation, and getting very deep into the self, because it all starts with, who am I? What am I about? And that podcast is called Minding the Gap. So that's the gap from where we are to where we want to be, and how can we pay attention to that so that we can move forward and use the richness of the gap to move forward. And then for parents who want to break patterns from their childhood, if they had trauma, abuse, just patterns of not feeling seen and heard, I have a podcast called Parenting Beyond Discipline, which is about everything parenting out there for raising just amazing kids who go out in the world and they just thrive because they're happy and well adjusted.
And folks, you can Google that, or you can look in the notes for this show. We're going to have all of Erin's good stuff down there. And if people want to find you personally, what's the best place for them to look for you?
My website, yourvillageonline.com. There's a contact on there. They can email.
I have got a website empty right now. That's the name, Your Village Online. I love it.
Or they can email podcast@yourvillageonline.com to reach out to my assistant, Amy, and get any questions over for either podcast or just to say hi.
Sweet. Okay, so the question I ask everyone as we approach the end of the podcast, and I hate it when the end comes because I love meeting new people, but the question is, What is the legacy you would like to leave behind?
I would really like for to help people and help guide people to drop the guilt, drop the shame, show up as their true selves, find the courage and face their fears so that they can live a life that's really fulfilling and stop keeping ourselves in cages. Most of the time, we are keeping ourselves imprisoned by belief structures that just don't work for us. And then also help parents break cycles of their childhood to, so that their kids aren't having to go through all this angst that we adults are dealing with the relationships and who am I and my triggers, getting rid of as much of that. No, we're not going to be perfect. We're always a work in progress, but releasing a lot of that so that their kids don't have to work through all that once they reach adulthood.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, that's part of our mission over here is helping parents to have greater joy and resilience in their own lives so their children have joyful and resilient lives as well. Love that. We are of one heart. Thank you so much for coming to the show. Uh, Perhaps we can do this again.
This was wonderful. This was such a great conversation.
All right. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.